must ask you though, how we use those, how we acknowledge and use and process those emotions so that they don't then lead us astray or are suppressed in a way that might amount to post-traumatic stress disorder later on. All
right. So let me do this from a personal standpoint. 25 years ago, I think, Sharon and I were a young family with a little 4-year-old boy. And life was quite tough, but we were loving being parents, and we were ready to have another child, and we got pregnant to have another child. And about 14 weeks into the pregnancy, 14, 16 weeks, something like that, Sharon suddenly started having contractions, and there'll be probably hundreds of the people watching tonight who've had this experience and know where we're headed here. That this Sharon was a nurse, and contractions are not a good thing at 14 weeks. And we were into the car and down out of the mountains to hospital, and this was clearly we were miscarrying. We're going to lose this baby. And we got through that day, and I sort of, pretty intense and pretty vivid and terrible day. But the next morning I had to run a weekend training seminar, and I told people and said to the people there, I had the good sense to say what had happened to us, but I had a job to do and had to look after them. Now, when that weekend was over, I just went into a numb, dead sort of place, and for months afterwards could feel almost nothing except grey pointlessness of things. And Sharon, because of her history, also pulled back into herself, and we didn't talk much, and it wasn't going well at all. And then one day I went out to the seminar room, which we had built on our farm, a little room that was a beautiful little space with skylights and the sunshine coming in. And I got my guitar down from hung on the wall and started just playing the guitar. And people listening who are musicians, who play the piano, play the guitar, sometimes you just doodle, you just muck about. And some chords started to come, and the chords were to a Rolling Stones song, which is called Ruby Tuesday. And I recognized what I was playing, and the words to that are, "Goodbye, Ruby Tuesday, who could hang a name on you?" And I was only into the first verse, and I was just suddenly just weeping, sitting on the floor, bending forwards over the guitar, just sobbing my eyes out, these great heaving sobs. And a tiny little corner of my brain, where this little psychologist part of my brain, watching this, thinking, wow, whoa, there you go, boy, this is probably good. This is probably what you needed. But just a torrent of grief. But when that was over, I could breathe better. I felt fresh and washed clean, and I could talk to Sharon again, and I could say to her what had happened. And there was also a cognitive change, Matthew, that's a song about a girl who went. I don't know what the real song is about, but it's about a girl who'd gone. And what I was realizing was that who knows what the child was that we lost at 14 weeks. There's nothing to see. But in my mind, I just realized that it was a girl. To me, it was a girl. We had a boy, and so I'd made some connections that I really wanted a daughter. And that was really good. We have a daughter now, and I'm able to love her with an open heart. Now, the purpose of sadness is to help us look into the abyss of our pain. And when we're crying, endorphins flood our system, but it's only when you actually weep that happens. If you're buttoning it up, or if you're just drunk, you know, I've got plenty of patients who are veterans who cried all the time when they were drunk, but it doesn't connect to the everyday us. So sadness has a job to do. Fear has a job to do. Anger has a job to do. If you don't have anger in your system, you could be standing in the supermarket car park and someone drives up and parks on your foot, and you just stand there, you know, you're saying, look, I hope you're not going to be too long, you know. You need a little bit of anger. You have to have anger even to chew a carrot. You have to have anger. You know, it's like, it's you or me, carrot. One of us is going to have to die. And so emotions are no big deal. In a healthy person, they're there, and people are absolutely comfortable with you. They feel safe around you. You'd be furious, and they're not frightened of you. They just think, oh, actually, I better take notice. You know, Matthew cares about that. I mustn't mess him about. That's all. It's no big deal. But in a person who's not in touch with that, there's violence, and there's death, and there's mayhem. So it's just that subtle change, just making room for them.
Interesting as well, Steve, because you talk in the book about people who are angry, often not actually angry, but frightened. You talk about people who are abusive in their relationships.
Yeah. Yes, I mean, I've worked with messed up men, has been my life's work. And yeah, it's fear of feeling like we have to control everyone to feel safe. And if you grew up in a violent family, you really want to be in control. And you think that if I can just control everyone, I'll be safe. You know, my wife will be faithful to me and do what I want and make love when I'm anxious. And it's just the complete opposite. You can't, you know, love is a dance, and you got to let people be themselves. And so getting in touch with the little boy terrors means that then you're lovable, and
this is very this is I think fascinating that you say love is a dance and you need to let people be themselves, because I can imagine that some people, men or women, perhaps it's more male than female, I don't know, might inadvertently control their partner, not out of malice, but because they are worried that perhaps there isn't sufficient similarity, there aren't enough shared interests, there isn't sufficient compatibility, so they try to control things and draw, or rather drag, that partner closer to them, and in the end it bursts because it doesn't work.
Yes, it's really sad, but it is. I mean, we would like to control people if you know, you sort of think that the appeal of that is enormous. You know, just have people do what I think is good. You know, let me choose the picnic, or let me choose the show we're going, or what we're going to have for dinner.
Then you end up falling in love with someone who isn't really them.
That's right. That's exactly
who's not the real them, and that's the recipe for sadness, ultimately, isn't it?
Of course. Yes, it's very scary to be in a relationship and just kind of trust that someone will love you. And big topic.
But important. Go back to childhood for a moment, as I said, if you will. There are those who believe that so much of who we are, and so much perhaps of the trauma that some of us experience, or so much of the anxiety that we might manifest, or the OCD or whatever, a lot of that can be formed very, very early on in life, in the first 3 years. Now, this is a school of thought, perhaps, and people will disagree about it and differ, but for you, for your view of how the human mind works, how important do you think those very, very early years are, and what can we do about it if they are?
Yes, well, I think that for the last couple of years, when I started writing Fully Human, I was coming to it as a therapist and coming from having 40 years working with people. But the neuroscience was fascinating, and I got into sort of books with, with titles like this, affect regulation and the origin of the self, and Alan Shaw, and was amazed, because it turns out this is, and it's only just being discovered. And when you're a little baby, you're reading faces. A little baby's, the way our brain works is that the right hemisphere of our brain watches our mum and dad's, or whoever's around it, watches their face. And there's studies, if a mum's, say it's a mum and her face changes expression, and they have a baby hooked up to a brain scan at the, with a couple of little electrodes taped on its head, it's a 1/100th of a second before the baby reacts to the mother's facial expression change. And the technicians kept saying to the neuroscience, there's no, it's instant, we can't measure, it's too small to measure the time. The mother and the baby are like a single unit. Now, the baby does not like it if the mother if the mother scowls or goes flat with affect, the baby starts to freak out, and especially if they're a baby boy, which is interesting, much more so. And what's happening is that the baby is learning to steer its own emotions within a safe enough range of its caregiver, that the caregiver will keep paying attention and won't freak out. And so as we are growing up, we're learning to keep our emotional range within what our parents can tolerate. Now, think of a dad who, a lot of my patients were soldiers, and if you think of a dad and he's with a little boy by the roadside outside their house, and they've gone out because they just heard a car skidding, and they go out there and their little pet dog has been hit by the car. And this little boy and this dog have been inseparable, and the boy is standing looking at his dog dead on the road, and the dad is beside him, and the little boy just fills with grief. Now, because of the way we work as human beings, if someone around us in grief, we will go into grief as well. And so the dad starts to feel the grief of the little boy, but he was in a war, and his grief is about seeing his friends blown to pieces all around him. And so his experience is, I can't go there. If I go there, I will go mad with grief. I will just disintegrate. And so all he knows is, somewhere down in his gut, which we'll talk about in a minute, this whole gut business, down in his super sense, in his gut, he feels like, I just have to stop this happening. So he says something, the best case scenario, he says to that little boy, look, don't worry, mate, we'll get you another dog. It's just a dog. Now, that's the best case scenario. Worst case is that he smacks him across the head. Says, cut that out, son. Don't be weak. Get out. Let's get out of here. Cut it out. And that little boy will just tighten up on those emotions as best he can, and go on to be someone who treats people like just the same, and is violent and horrible to other people. And so all that dad has needed to do was to throw an arm around that little boy and say, you're a good kid. It's really sad. She was a beautiful dog, and we'll really miss her. And both of them have a little cry, and it'll be all right, And the little boy will experience, like, I'm devastated, but dad is right. I can feel dad right here beside me, holding me. So it's unbearable, but it's bearable because dad's there. That's how it's meant to work. I've forgotten where we started there. Sorry, Matthew.
I'm very pleased you brought in the super sense here, because that's how you begin the book. And you talk actually quite dramatically about a woman who narrowly avoids being abducted at knife point, and her reaction to that, and what she wants from those around her, and importantly, that she was able to take herself out of that situation through this sort of instinct, sixth sense, we might call it. You call it the super sense. How do we make sure that our super sense, as you describe it, does not come to dominate? Because while super senses can keep us alive, quite literally, anxiety, the anxiety, for example, that I've experienced, might be seen as a sort of over super sense. So your super sense is on super high alert a lot of the time when you're going through an anxious period, and that can be very, very destructive.
Yes. So let's explain to people watching what we mean by super sense and how it works, and then we'll take it into those when it malfunctions. Now, here's a really simple example. A teenage girl, 16 years old, her name's Genevieve, and she's got a boyfriend, and he's a sweet guy, and it's been going really well. They've been going out for 6 months or so, but just lately he's been putting a little bit of pressure onto her to have sex. They kiss and cuddle and heaps, but just lately he's wanting to go further. And Genevieve is really lucky. She is close to her mum, and she talks to her mum a lot. So you've got the picture here. She naturally tells her mum. She says, "Oh, mum, he wants to have sex. I don't know what to do." And her mum says, "Well, how do you feel about it?" And she's a sensible mum. She doesn't say, do this, do that. The 16-year-old girl, she knows she has to help make her own mind up. How do you feel about it? She puts it back to Genevieve. Genevieve says, "Oh, I don't know. I love him. He's the best boy in the world. I don't know what I want to do." And then the mum does something which is like a Pulitzer Prize winning thing to say as a mum. She says, "Well, listen, honey, sometimes your body knows what's right for you. Your brain can be in a complete spin, your heart's all over the place, but somewhere down in your body knows what you want, and it sends you signals." And as soon as the mother says this, and I know this family really well, and as soon as the mum said that, Genevieve said, "Oh," she said, "you're right." She says, "1 minute, we're sitting in a bus stop in the rain somewhere, having a kiss and a cuddle, and I'm in heaven. It's brilliant. But when he comes on too strong, I feel really squashed. I feel really uncomfortable. I don't want to have sex with him yet." Bang, out it comes. And Matthew, this is a story that I tell in one of my talks on raising daughters. And the women in the room they all just nod their heads when we talk about this. They kind of bite their lip and they nod their heads like that. The whole room full of women, because women know about this. If it's not right, it's not right. And what that mum did, and what anyone watching who's a parent can do, is you direct your child to their own inner signals, because there's a place down inside you that knows. And the incredible thing is that, of course, is that we would not be aware of that. We should just know we know and feel comfortable. But a modern young woman like Genevieve, her mum had to sort of send her inwards to find her true self, if you like, what her true sense was below her feelings. So that's what super sense is. It's the part of you. You use words like intuition, but it's a kind of deep, visceral knowing, which in our civilization we completely wiped out from our minds. We just don't even have a clue often. But we can. Listening to this program tonight, people watching, you can use this. You know how to do it now. You can do it every day for the rest of your life, and I hope you will, because this is the foundation of mental health. Is deep down what the holistic totality of you feels. Now, Matthew, it's important to say you've got a beautifully responsive face, and so I can almost see, what else I need to say is it can be wrong too. and super sense can be baggage, and it can be conditioning. But at least if you know what if you're aware of it, you can interrogate it and stop that from driving you along in bad ways. So again, my Aspie part is saying, stop talking, give the other person a chance. Yeah, how are we doing there?
Yeah, no, we're doing really well. I'm just curious to probe a little bit deeper now you've established what super sense is, so that we make sure that we don't get led astray by it.
Yes. Okay. So a typical example of, okay, you can have the way your super sense works is that your senses take in everything. We're a wild creature, and a wild creature has two halves to its brain. It has, if it's a bird, for example, has the thrush wants to go for that snail on the footpath. Its left hemisphere goes, snail, yum. But its right hemisphere, its brain, is checking out what else is going on. Is there a cat in the bushes? And you need both those halves. Now, but if you've got baggage, you've got experiences. So, for instance, I have a good friend who was a soldier in Vietnam. It's sort of my generation of men. In Coffs Harbour in New South Wales, where we lived, and he was going pretty well for a Vietnam veteran until a Vietnamese family moved into his street. And so some refugee family came to live in his street, and his body remembered the sights and the sounds of that war, where you never knew who was your enemy, and where everyone in the Vietnam War was terrified the whole time they were there. And so he had massive anxiety attacks, and he, not rocket science, he pretty quickly figured out what was going on. And he did a brilliant thing, Matthew. He's a terrific guy. He went down to their house and he introduced himself and said, hello, this is my name, and welcome to the street, and this is my kids' names, and you probably play with my kids. And he ended up being really good friends with that family. But what that did was it taught his right hemisphere to tell his amygdala that we're really safe here, and his heart and his gut just could soften and loosen. There was no way you could intellectually do that. It had to be super sensing the safety, and so that he wasn't a neurotic mess in that situation.
Okay,